Hey guys, in this mini-series we're going to be taking a look at Meteor.js. Okay, so Meteor.js is a full-stack JavaScript framework, and it uses a collection of libraries and packages that are neatly bound together to give us the ability to quickly prototype an app, but also build powerful production applications. Now, there's a ton of JavaScript frameworks out there, many of which I've done videos on, but I think what separates Meteor from a lot of the other frameworks, such as Angular, is that it runs on both the front end and the back end. Alright, and not only that, it uses the same API in the front end and the back end. Meteor can be used for web applications as well as mobile apps. Alright, so another big difference that Meteor has is that it uses subscriptions as opposed to requests and response. Alright, so most frameworks will make a request to a resource and then send back a response. Well, with Meteor, users will subscribe to certain events on the server through a WebSocket, and the socket constantly serves the subscribers, whether it's rendering a template or fetching data, whatever it may be. And this makes it very fast, and it also makes it instant. Okay, so Meteor uses MongoDB, and as far as I know, that's the only database that it uses. Alright, but what's really cool is that you have access to the database from everywhere, on the front end and the back end. Alright, it's on the server, of course, and then it's also runs in the browser in something called Minimongo. Alright, and Meteor somehow magically keeps these in sync. Alright, you can access data using your client console just as you would on the server. Alright, so if you're in Chrome, you open up Chrome tools, go in the console, and you can just run queries from there. When your application needs to change or display data, that all happens asynchronously on the client first, and then those changes are sent to the server, and that's called latency compensation. Alright, and we'll take a look at this later on. So data is stored in MongoDB collections, and if you're not familiar with NoSQL databases and collections, it's basically a table. A collection is kind of like a table in a relational database. Alright, so if it's a blog, you may have a post collection and a categories collection. This is the primary persistence mechanism of the data in Meteor. And you can see to create a collection is really easy. We're just saying to-dos equals new mongo.collection, and then whatever you want to name it, to-dos. Okay, when this runs, it does two different things. On the server, it does what you would expect. It just creates a MongoDB collection and an interface to that collection. When it runs on the client, it creates a collection, but that is a client-side cache of the MongoDB database, and this is achieved using the Minimongo library. And what Minimongo is an implementation of the MongoDB API, and this is all held in memory. Alright, so this is what the server basically consists of. Okay, it's a Node.js app with certain libraries that communicate with the front end over DDP and eJSON. Okay, DDP stands for Distributed Data Protocol, which is a simple protocol for fetching structured data from a server. Alright, and it receives live updates when that data changes. And then eJSON is just an extension of JSON with some additional data types. Okay, it also uses the connect module, which is an HTTP library for request and response. It uses the Mongo driver, which is just a simple Mongo interface driver. It uses live query, which streams out Mongo data reactively. And then it also uses fibers and fixtures, which is a wrapper library for Node.js and makes it synchronous. Now, if all this sounds like absolute gibberish to you, don't worry about it. I just want to explain how it works. This isn't really, it's not the most important thing for you to know. I know that you're probably here to learn how to create a Meteor application, and we're going to get to that. I just want to kind of let you know how it works. Alright, so let's take a look at what the client side consists of, or the browser. Now, a lot of the code uses jQuery and _JS as the foundation. We have Tracker, which provides reactivity on the front end. Okay, space bars, which is the template library that's used in the front end, and this is how we can insert dynamic data into our application, all right into the HTML and the view. It's extended from handlebars, so if you know handlebars, then you shouldn't have any problems with space bars, which is easy to learn anyway. Blaze is a reactive library that uses tracker and space bars to create a live updating user interface. All right, Minimongo, which we've talked about, that's the client-side MongoDB library, which syncs up to the server. And then Sessions, which this is a library to handle reactive user interface state variables. All right, again, this stuff here isn't really, you don't need to master it to be able to build a Meteor app. All right, just kind of want to go over what it is. All right, and like with any good framework, we have a package manager. Okay, Meteor has its own package manager that is used to install small libraries or add-ons that can bring in new functionality. All right, and this can range from anything from authentication and authorization to routing to social functionality and pretty much anything you can think of. All right, and Atmosphere is a really popular package repository that we'll be using. All right, so we'll get into that later on, but for now we're going to stick to just the core Meteor functionality. All right, so enough with this boring slide stuff. Let's go ahead and jump in and just install Meteor and see where it takes us. All right, so let's go ahead and get Meteor installed. Now, Meteor can run on pretty much any platform out there: Windows, Linux, Mac. I'm using Windows here, so what we're going to do is go to Meteor.com and click on Install Meteor. All right, now if you were using Mac or Linux, you would install it using curl, and you can also use curl in Windows, but there is a Windows installer that we can use. That's a lot easier. So let's click on that and download it. All right, so install Meteor.exe. Let's open that up. Okay, it's going to take us through a little wizard here. And I will be pausing the video through, if it's taking a while. So if it seems like mine is a lot faster than yours, that's why. All right, so now it's asking us if we want to create a Meteor developer account. All right, now if you plan on using Meteor a lot, I would suggest doing it because you can actually deploy apps with their free service. So I think I have an existing account, but I'm not sure what password I used or anything like that. So I'm just going to create a new one here. So I'm just going to put in one of my email addresses. Okay, username, I'll say just password. All right. Okay, Meteor is now installed on your computer. Open a new command prompt and type Meteor. If you're running Windows, you may need to restart your machine. So let's go ahead and open up a command line. Okay, I'm going to run as administrator, and you want to go to whatever the folder where you hold your projects. All right, so I'm going to go into my projects folder. All right, now when you create a new Meteor application, it'll create the folder for you. All right, so you don't want to actually manually create the project folder. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say Meteor create, and I'm just going to call this task list. Okay, and that's going to go through and create all the folders and files for us. All right, and if I go to Sublime Text, and let me add that folder to as a project. Let's see, task list. Okay, so if we look over here, we have a folder called Meteor. This holds like everything, all the Meteor stuff, MongoDB, all that crap that you don't need to touch. All right, so don't even pay attention to that. What it does is it gives you an HTML file, a CSS file, and a JavaScript, all named whatever you called your application. All right, now if we look at the HTML, it gives us a little sample app, and I guess we can run that just to show you. All right, now it says to run your app, go into task list and type in Meteor. All right, so let's go to task list and Meteor. Okay, so let's see. We need to allow access through the firewall, and now it says, what does it say? Okay, looks like it's still going. All right, you can see what it did. Started proxy, started MongoDB, started your app. Okay, and now it's at localhost port 3000. So let's go there. All right, so this is the sample app that they give you by default, and it's not much. It doesn't look like much. Basically, we have a button. If we click it, it's going to increase this number by 1. All right, and if we reload, it goes back to 0. So let's take a look at the code that runs this. All right, so the HTML here, you can see we just have an HTML document. Inside of our body, we have an H1, and then we have this thing here. All right, so this is using the spacebar syntax, which is very similar to handlebars if you've ever used that. All right, so it's just a way of using dynamic content in our view, in our HTML. All right, so what we're doing, we have this greater than sign here. This is telling it that we want to render this template. Okay, so a template named hello. And if you look down here, we have a template tag with the name attribute of hello. Okay, so it's going to render this right here. Now inside the hello template, we have a button, and then we have a paragraph, but in the paragraph you can see we have this counter variable, okay, and we're using space bars. So this counter is coming from, if we look in the JavaScript, we have this right here, template.hello.helpers. That counter is coming from here, okay? So we're returning something here, which is session.get.counter. Okay, so there's a variable set inside of the session called counter, and that's what it's returning. Now right here you can see we have template.hello.events. So templates can have helpers, which are just functions, and then events. Okay, and this particular event is going to be a click event, and it's going to be on a button. Okay, and then it runs this function, and what it's doing is it's setting that counter. Okay, it's setting it to whatever the counter is plus 1. Okay, that's why every time we click it, it adds a new one. All right, so just remember that templates have helpers, which are just functions. They also can have events. And if we look up here, we have session.setDefault counter 0. So we're setting the counter to 0 right here. All right, now, as I've said, Meteor runs on the client and server. Now, in this particular case, we're using one file, and we have server and client code in the same file. And if you do that, you can use this right here. If Meteor.isClient, and then anything that's inside of this is only going to run on the client. All right, and then down here we have Meteor.isServer. Anything that's in here is going to run only on the server. Anything outside of these is going to run on both. Okay, so just remember that. Normally, if you're building a real application, you'll have a folder called client or whatever you want to call it, which will hold all the client stuff, and then a folder called server that'll hold all the server stuff. All right, but most of your dynamic functionality is going to run on both. Okay, things like the collection and queries, things like that. All right, so what I want to do now is just get rid of this altogether. All right, so everything inside is client. Let's get rid of. Okay, and then everything in is server. Okay, so what I want to do is create a collection called tasks. All right, so up here we're going to say tasks. Now this code needs to be run on both, so you don't want to have it inside either of these. So we're going to say tasks equals new mongo.collection tasks. Now, before I even type anything in here in our code, I just want to show you that we can access the collection from the browser, from the client, all right, just by having this. So we save that, and actually let's go to the HTML and let's get rid of this for now. Actually, you know what we'll do is let's put right here, I guess we can call the template to-dos, and then we'll change that to to-dos. And for now I'm just going to get rid of this. Alright, so let's go ahead and save that and reload. Okay, so we still have the H1, that's fine. Now remember, we created that task collection, so what I'm going to do is go down here and we're going to say tasks, okay, whatever you name your collection, dot find, and then dot fetch. Alright, and it's going to return whatever we have in the task collection, which of course is nothing, but you can see it gives us an empty array. Alright, now we can actually add tasks from here. So let's say tasks, task dot insert. Alright, and we're going to pass in some curly braces here, and we'll have a name for the task. Alright, in this case, let's just call it task 1, and then we can have a date, so let's call this field created at, so we'll say created at, and then we can actually say new date. Okay, we can run the date function, which will give us right now. Alright, and we'll run that. Now you can see it gave us back this ID. Alright, so let's run that again, the fetch method, and it gives us back an object which has an ID, it has a created at, and it has our name, task 1. Alright, so you can actually create tasks from right inside the browser. Alright, let's run it one more time. We'll create one more task. We'll call it task 2. Okay, and now if we fetch, now we have 2 objects. Okay, 2 tasks. So this right here is an example of what sets Meteor aside from a lot of those other JS frameworks. Now, if we want to display these in the browser, we can. We'll go to our JavaScript file, and we know that we now have a template called tasks. So let's say template, template dot tasks. Is that what I called? Oh, I called it to-dos. Oh, that's wrong. Let's call it tasks. Okay. So template.tasks.helpers. Alright, and then let's say tasks is going to be a function. And what we want to do is return tasks.find. Alright, and then in here, let's just pass in an empty curly braces, and then we can also sort. So let's say sort, then we need another set of curly braces, and we'll sort it by created at, so sort it by the time, and we're going to say -1. Okay, and let's save that. Alright, so this is going to give us all of our tasks. Now, to actually get this and iterate through it, we're going to go to our HTML right in here, and we're going to use our space bars, and we're going to use an each loop. Okay, so you want to go each and then tasks. Okay, so this here is this. Okay, and we know that this is returning an array of tasks, so we want to iterate through it using each, and we'll end the each like this. Alright, now in between here, actually, you know what I'm going to do is create a UL. Okay, and inside here we'll have list items. Alright, and let's output the names. Alright, so let's save that and reload. and there we go. There's our tasks. All right, and it's persisted to our Mongo database. So we can still add them down here. Let's say we want to add 3, and it automatically gets added. All right, if I reload, it's still there because it was persisted into the collection on the server in MongoDB. Now, what if we want to be able to add tasks from our application, which is probably what you want. You probably don't want your users to have to open up a console and add them. All right, so what we'll do is, let's say add task, and down here we're going to have an H3 that just says tasks. Okay, and then we'll put a simple form here. Okay, I realize that this isn't going to look too good. I don't really care about the design and what it looks like. I just want you guys to grasp the functionality, and then you can go and add Bootstrap or whatever you want to do with it. All right, so let's see. In our form, what are we going to need? We're going to need, let's put a label, and we'll say task name. All right, and then we'll have an input. Type will be text. Name is going to be name. And we can put a placeholder. We'll just say add task. All right, now I actually don't want to put this here. I want to put this inside of tasks. All right, so I'm going to grab the form. You know what? Let's grab everything that's here and put that in. Okay, we'll just cut that. All right. Let me just fix this a little bit. All right, so we have our form, we have an input. Now we need a button. All right, so we'll say input type is going to be submit. Okay, value submit. All right, so let's take a look at that. All right, so we have our little form here. Now, what we're going to want to do is make the submission for this form an event. So let's take this form and let's give it a class of add task. All right, now what we'll do is go back into our JavaScript, and instead of in our helpers, we're going to need to set up our events. So template.tasks.events. Okay, so the way that we're going to set this up is we need the actual event, which is going to be a submit, and then we need the element, which is going to be add task. All right, so then we'll run a function. Okay, I'm going to pass in an event parameter here, and then what we'll do is create a variable called name, and we're going to set this to event.target.name.value. Okay, and that'll give us whatever we put in the form. And just to test this out, let's do console.log name. Okay, so we'll reload. All right, and we'll say test submit, and oh, you can see that it did flash down there. What we're going to want to do is return false. All right, so let's see, we're going to go down here and return false. All right, so now we'll try that again. Test submit, and now we get test down here. So we know that this is now calling this event. Alright, so let's get rid of that. So what we want to do with this is we want to submit it to our collection. Alright, so to do that we can say tasks.insert. Alright, and then in here we're going to do the same thing that we did from within the console earlier. Alright, we'll say name, and that's going to be name. It's also going to have created at, and that's going to be new date. Alright, and then we just want to clear the form, so we'll grab this and we're going to set it to nothing. Alright, and that should do it. So let's save that and we'll refresh the page. Alright, and let's say task 4, and there we go. Task 5, I can reload and it should be persisted. Alright. Now, what if we want to delete one from here? Alright, so to do that, let's go to right next to the name here, and we're going to put in a span. We'll give it a class of delete task. Alright, actually no, this will be an A tag. So A class delete task, and let's put an ending A tag, and let's actually put an href. Just not going to go anywhere though. And then I'm just going to put an X in here. Alright, so we'll save that. Alright, so now we have these X links, okay? So it's delete tasks, so we want to create an event in here. Okay, so where this ends, we want to put a comma. Alright, and then let's just put in click and dot delete task. Okay, that's going to run a function. Pass in event. Okay, at the bottom we want to return false. And let's do a little confirmation. Okay, so we're going to say if confirm, and then this will say delete task. And then all we have to do here is say tasks dot remove, and then we can pass in this dot underscore ID. Alright, so let's give that a shot. Alright, now if I click task 5x, delete task, okay, and it goes away. Okay, it's as easy as that. If I reload, we still only have 3. Now, chances are, if you're building an application and you're able to add or remove data from a database, you don't want just anybody to be able to come to the app and do that. Alright, so we can easily implement some authentication here, or user accounts in Meteor. Alright, and we can do that with a simple package. So let's go back to our command line. Alright, I'm going to Control-C and just get out of everything. Alright. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say Meteor add, and then you can add your packages. Alright, so we want one called accounts UI, and we also want one called accounts password. Okay, just like that. So we'll run that. Alright guys, that took quite a while. It took about 5 minutes or so. For some reason, I don't know if yours is going to take that long or not, but once it's done, you should see this screen in your command line. Okay, so what I want to do now is, now that we have those installed, we're going to go back to our HTML, and we just want to put in a simple placeholder for our login. Alright, so I'm going to go, actually the server's not running. I'm going to go right above the heading here, and what we're going to do is we're going to use our curly braces, and then a greater than, and then what we want to put in here is login buttons. All right, just like that. So we'll save that, and now let's go ahead and run the app. All right, so that should now be running. And now you can see above everything we have this sign in. If we click that, we have this little email password input. We also have a create account link right here, okay? So we obviously don't have an account, so let's go ahead and create one. And we'll put in our email, password, create account, and once we create the account, we're actually logged in. Okay, if we click that, we could change our password and we can sign out. All right, so that is extremely simple to set up just our basic authentication. Now we have the authentication, but it's not actually stopping us from doing anything. All right, if we sign out, we can still add a task, which we don't want. So first thing we're going to do is when we insert a task here, we're going to want to have our user ID as part of the object. All right, so let's say user ID, and we're going to set that to Meteor user ID, which is a function. All right, just like that. So we'll save that. Let's go to the form where we have the form, and we're going to put in an if statement here. Okay, so we want our double curly braces, and we're going to say if current user. Okay, and then we want to end that after the form. All right, so let's see what that does. All right, so now the form's not there. Actually, we don't want the heading to show. Actually, you know what we could do is let's put an else, and if they're not logged in, whoops, we'll put a paragraph. We'll say please log in to add tasks. All right. Now we also don't want them to be able to delete tasks either, so we're going to do that same thing down here. Okay, we'll put that, and then we'll end it here. All right, so now this application is completely read-only if we're not logged in. All right, so let's try logging in. And now you can see we have our form back and we can delete. All right, so that's how we can add very, very simple authentication. Now, even though we have authentication to show certain elements, this still isn't secure. This isn't ready for production, because the way we have it is that anything in the database on the server can be messed with by the client, all right? And we don't want that. We want to specifically subscribe to certain stuff on the server. Now, when we set up an application like we have, there's a package called insecure that it uses, and the reason that it's set to true when you first create an app is to be able to quickly prototype it, to not have any boundaries and be able to do whatever you want from the client, from the server. But when you're ready for production, you're going to want to remove that package, and then you're going to want to use what are called methods, Meteor methods, and it's just a more secure way to run your functionality, your queries, or whatever it is that your app does. Alright, so what we're going to do is go into the command line, and I'm going to stop this from running, and then we're going to say Meteor remove insecure. Okay, that'll remove that package. Alright, now we'll go ahead and run Meteor. Alright, let's go back, reload. Okay, now we're still logged in. If I click the X, you'll see that it's not deleting anymore. Alright, and if I try to add, it's not letting us. If you look down here, we have remove field, access denied. Alright, so let's go back to our JavaScript file, and we're going to go all the way to the bottom outside of the client or server code. Alright, and we're going to say Meteor.methods. Alright, and then we're going to open up curly braces inside there, and let's think about the functionality that we want to have as a method. So in our application, the two main things we can do is add a task and delete a task. Alright, so let's do one for add task. Okay, so we'll call it add task. It's going to be a function. Okay, it's going to get passed in a name. And what we want to do here is we want to check for the user. So we're going to say if there's no Meteor.user ID, then they're not going to be allowed to run this add task function. Okay, so we'll just we'll throw new Meteor.error, and then you can put whatever text you want. We'll just say no access. Alright, so that'll at least check to see if the user is logged in. So we're going to want to grab this, the insert, and I'm just going to copy it for now, and then we'll put that right under the if statement. Alright, so add task is going to check to see if we're logged in, if we're authorized, and then it's going to run the insert. Okay, so underneath that, we're going to have our delete task. Okay, and that's going to do where is it? This right here, task remove. Alright, so we'll just grab that, copy it for now. Alright, now this delete, we're not going to be able to use this anymore, so we're going to be passing in a task ID, and then we'll put it right there, task ID. So to run this add task, we're going to replace this right here, and what we can do is say meteor.call. Okay, it's going to take in two things. It's going to take in what we want to run, which is add task, and then the second is what we want to pass in, and that's going to be the name, okay, which is coming from here, and you can see it's being passed in here, and then that's being inserted along with the date and the user ID. If you had more fields in your task, you would add more into the parameters. All right, and then same thing for the remove or the delete. We're going to replace that with meteor.call delete task, and we're going to pass in what was, I think it was this. Actually, let me just check. This dot underscore ID. Just like that, okay, and that's being passed in as the task ID. Now, not only is using methods more secure, but it also allows you to keep all your functions in one place, which is a lot easier than having them scattered everywhere. All right, now, if you were building a production application, you would have a different file structure. You would have a client folder for all your client code, a server folder, and probably a methods file, a file that's dedicated to your methods. All right, and not in this mini course or whatever you want to call it. I'm not going to be doing that, but I will be doing a more in-depth application with Meteor very soon. All right, so we'll look into that for another time. All right, so let's make sure that this is saved, and we'll go back and reload. And now if we go and delete, now we're able to delete, and we'll say task 4, and we can add. Okay, so our application is more secure now. Now there is something else that we need to do now, and if you remember back when I started this video, I talked about subscriptions, okay, and how Meteor works on subscribers instead of request and response. Well, right now we're still in the prototyping stage. We're getting there, but we still have auto publish on, and that's going to make it so that no matter what, when we add something to our database, it's going to automatically publish and everyone can see it. All right, now if we're going to create a production application, we don't want auto publish on. What we want to do is remove it first of all, and then we need to create our subscriptions to let the application know what the user is able to see or not. All right, so let's go back to our command line, and we're going to stop this, and we're going to say Meteor remove auto publish. Okay, so now let's go back and run Meteor. Okay, so let's go and reload. And now you can see that we can't see any tasks anymore. All right, they're still in the database, but the way we have our application now, we're not subscribed to see the tasks. All right, so even if I add another one, we'll say my task and submit. I mean, it did submit, but we can't see it because we're not subscribed to it. Okay, so we need to do some stuff. So in our JavaScript, we're actually going to now need to be in the is server, all right, because we're going to call our publish function from there. So we want to be inside here, and then we're going to say Meteor. We're going to say Meteor.publish. Okay, we want to publish tasks, and then the second parameter is going to be a function. And then what we want to do is return tasks.find. All right, just like that. So that'll publish them, but it's only the parts of the application that are subscribed to it are actually going to be able to see the tasks. All right, so we want to go up here, back into the client, and let's say Meteor.subscribe, and we want to subscribe to tasks. Okay, so let's save that, and hopefully that works. Alright, good. So now we can see our tasks again. And you can see this is the one that I actually added when we couldn't see them. If I try to delete, okay, we can also delete them. If I try to add, we can also add them. Alright, so now we're subscribed to tasks. Now I want to try something, and we're going to sign out. Okay, we can't access anything. Now let's create another account. Okay, so we'll say create account, and we'll just say I don't know, John@gmail. Okay, and then password, create account. Okay, so now we just created a new account as John, and we logged in, and you can see that we can see all of our tasks, all the tasks that were created by Brad's account, and I can go ahead and delete them. All right, and that's not really what we want. You don't want people to be able to touch your stuff. Okay, we want Brad to have his own task list, and then John to have his own, and anyone else who registers for this application. Now, if you remember, we have a field in each task for the user ID. So down here, I'm just going to say tasks.find.fetch. Okay, so we have our objects here, and actually, I don't think the first two have the ID. Or wait a minute, none of them do. We have ID created at name. Let me just check this real quick. Okay, we should have user ID as well. Alright, so you know what I'm going to do is just delete all of these. Okay, so now it's empty. So let's add another one. We'll say my task. Oh, actually, let's say, what are we, John? We'll say John's task 1. Submit. Okay, so now let's find. Okay, so now we have our user ID right here. So let's create another one for John. Okay, so each one of these has John's user ID. So where we're publishing the task, which is in the server, which is right here, inside of this find, let's add some curly braces, and we're going to say user ID, and that should equal this dot user ID. Actually, no, just like that. Okay, and let's save that. Okay, so this is exactly right. We're John, we see John's tasks. Now let's go ahead and sign out, and let's log in as Brad. Okay, so we're now logged in as Brad, and you can see we have no tasks. So let's say Brad's task 1, Brad's task 2. Okay, so we're only seeing our own tasks, which is what we want. So let's check again, make sure John can't see those. And there we go. So we're only seeing our own tasks. Alright, so I think I'm going to end it here. We covered basically all the fundamentals of Meteor.js, and hopefully you guys liked it. You learned something from it. I apologize, it did go a little longer than I had planned, but yeah, so that's it. Please subscribe, leave it a like if you liked it, and thanks for watching.